Hi, everyone. I'm going to get us started. By way of introduction, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Akila Radhakrishnan, the president of the Global Justice Center, a human rights organization using international law to achieve gender equality and dismantle systems of oppression. We combine feminist legal analysis with strategic advocacy to ensure equal protection of the law for women and girls. Oh, sorry, 1 second. I think we're having just some issues with the interpretation function. There we go. Well, I'll skip right ahead to that. So for those who are joining us today, we have live Burmese interpretation. So if that's your preference, please do use the Burmese language channel. The panelists here will all be speaking in English. And a reminder to the speakers, including myself, to speak slowly to allow for appropriate interpretation as well. So it's my delight to welcome you to this event, which is organized in partnership with Human Rights Watch, the Global Center on the Responsibility to Protect, the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, the Asia Justice Coalition, and No Peace Without Justice. So I'm just going to start with a little housekeeping. You're going to hear from each of our panelists first, and then we'll go into a moderated Q&A. And after that, we'll open up to audience questions. For the audience, please feel free to start asking your questions at any time using the Q&A box. We ask that you use the Q&A box and not the chat if at all possible. So thank you so much for that. And then to get us started, I'm just going to take a little bit of moderator's privilege to briefly frame the discussion today. So yesterday, we saw the hearings open back up in the Gambia versus Myanmar case at the International Court of Justice. The case, which is based on breaches of the Genocide Convention, is one of the key cases moving accountability forward in Myanmar, particularly for the Rohingya. The ICC currently has an ongoing investigation, and Argentine courts are using universal jurisdiction to ensure criminal accountability for Myanmar's leaders. These efforts are complemented by the work of the Independent Investigative Mechanism for Myanmar, which, building on the work of the UN fact-finding mission, has been collecting evidence to support accountability proceedings since 2018. The establishment of the IIMM in 2018 and movement on the cases at the ICJ, the ICC, and Argentina in 2019 represented a sea change in the near total impunity the Tatmadaw had been afforded for decades of horrific crimes, in particular against ethnic minorities, including the Karen, Kachin, Shan, and Rohingya. However, in 2021, when the military staged a coup, a lot of this seemed to come to a pause. And that's really what we're talking about here today. And it's because, as the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has called it, the coup is a crisis born out of impunity. And so today, in addition to a continuation of crimes against ethnic minorities, we're also seeing widespread violent crackdown on anti-coup protesters all over Myanmar, acts which likely amount to crimes against humanity. And that's the reason for holding this event today. The vital need to break the military's impunity and to discuss the role that justice and accountability must play in resolving the current crisis in Myanmar. With that, I'm going to stop talking and introduce our fantastic and brilliant experts. So first, we have Weiwei Nu. Weiwei is a former political prisoner and founder and executive director of the Women Peace Network in Myanmar. Weiwei spent 7 years as a political prisoner in Burma because of her father's pro-democracy political activism. Since her release from prison in 2012, she has dedicated herself to working for democracy and human rights, particularly on behalf of marginalized women and members of her own ethnic group, the Rohingya. Sorry, I lost my document. Next, we have Tun Kin. Tun Kin is an ethnic Rohingya Muslim from Arkan State in Myanmar, the president of the Burmese Rohingya Organization UK, and a prominent activist for the Rohingya people. Tun Kin's tireless advocacy for the Rohingya cause has taken him around the globe several times over. He has spoken about the genocide facing the Rohingya before the US Congress, European Parliament, European Human Rights Council, and the UN Human Rights Council, and other UN bodies. Loi Pongel is a feminist trainer and an activist. She is the Joint General Secretary of the Women's League of Burma, an umbrella organization made up of 13 women's organizations with different political and ethnic backgrounds. She belongs to the Tang ethnicity, born in the Mantong township of northern Shan State. In 2017, she was elected as the General Secretary of WLB. Her achievements include the successful relocation of the WLB Secretariat from Thailand to Burma and the launch of a briefing paper, Girls Bear the Shame, Impediments to Justice for Girl Children Who Have Experienced Sexual Violence in Burma. Because of her significant work, she has recently been chosen as one of the Schuman awardees by the EU. Our next speaker is Saisam Kam, who has been working with various Myanmar CSOs for the last 20 years. He's been working with farmers and ethnic minorities in rural areas on rural development, humanitarian assistance, and human rights issues, and is now doing his PhD on land politics, rural democracy, and regime transition in the Netherlands. Sarah McIntosh is the associate of for the Friends International Justice Initiative of the Simon Skolt Center for the Prevention of Genocide at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. She's an Australian lawyer and author of Pursuing Justice for Mass Atrocities, a handbook for victim groups. And last but certainly not least, we have Ambassador Stephen Rapp. Ambassador Rapp has served as the U.S. Ambassador at Large for Global Criminal Justice from 2009 to 2015, where he coordinated U.S. government support to international criminal tribunals, including the International Criminal Court, as well as to hybrid and national courts responsible for prosecuting persons charged with genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. From 2007 to 2009, Ambassador Rapp served as the prosecutor for the Special Court for Sierra Leone, where he led the prosecution of former Liberian President Charles Taylor. And from 2001 to 2007, he served as a senior trial attorney and chief prosecutions at the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, where he led the trial team that achieved the first conviction in history against leaders of the mass media for the crime of direct and public incitement to commit genocide. And so those are all of our panelists. So we're going to start turning to each of them in turn to answer some key questions about the landscape of justice and accountability for Myanmar. So I'm going to turn to Weiwei first. Weiwei, as I noted in the intro, the coup was a crisis born from impunity. Impunity for decades of crimes against the population of Myanmar, in particular ethnic groups such as the Rohingya. When the Gambia filed its case in 2019, it was an important step to finally break the cycle of impunity in Myanmar, and more particularly, it brought razor focus to the atrocities committed against the Rohingya. Now, as the case moves forward, can you tell us about why this is important for both the Rohingya community, but as well for the entire population of Myanmar?
Thank you very much, Akila. I'm very honored to join this panel with all of you. And this case is very important, not only because it is the case is aimed to break the cycles of impunity, but also because the Myanmar military is still committing attack of genocide against Rohingya, as well as mass atrocities across the entire country as we speak. As a Rohingya woman and a former political prisoner, I am empowered to see that the highest court in the world will know what happened to us and our loved one and our relatives. For generations, the Myanmar military strategically persecuted us with the intent to destroy our group. The military killed, tortured us, and raped and assaulted our women and girls, and forced us to flee from our homes. Despite the ICJ's 2019 provisional measures today the Myanmar military is continuing to enforce genocidal policies and apartheid-like conditions on Rohingya in Rakhine State. The junta forces are imprisoning over 150,000 Rohingya in IDP camps in Rakhine State and arresting those escaping from persecutions. Since the February 1st coup, our organization has documented over 800 Rohingya were detained and arrested for traveling, for simply escaping from Rakhine State from persecutions. And at the same time, over 1 million Rohingya in Bangladesh are trapped in refugee camps. face increasing scrutinizations, deprived of their livelihoods, and have no hope for returning to their home in Myanmar. We Rohingya are suffering at the collective and individual levels in Myanmar and all over the world. Though this case may take years to resolve, it will provide us with hope that we will achieve justice one day. The ICJ case also reminds the international community that the accountability is crucial for Myanmar to achieve peace, freedom, and a lasting federal democracy. Since the attempted coup, the military junta also launched, as you mentioned, a systemic and widespread attack on the violence against the country's entire populations. I'm horrified that our common enemy is wielding tactics used against the Rohingya and other ethnic minorities to commit all of these crimes, including sexual violence and other grave human rights violations. We cannot bear another year under the brutal junta, and we cannot have a future in the country in these situations. It is pretty clear. Despite all the discussions about the representations before the court, one thing to remember is that this case is about the Rohingya and the suffering of its victims and survivors. For decades, our voices have been dismissed and our experience has been denied. This is time to change the strategies and approach for the actors involved in international justice processes as well. And I also think this case is an opportunity for our community to share our story to the world so that our world can never again allow this human catastrophe to occur in plain sight. We talk about never again over and over. Maybe perhaps this is the time that we can actually commit to that promise of never again by ending suffering of the Rohingya and other people around the world. And this case is one of the many ways in which Myanmar military's impunity and ongoing atrocities can be finally end. And we finally lived in peace and freedom and federal democratic union. In addition to supporting this case, international community must recognize that the ICJ case will take years. Therefore, the states and the UN Security Council must take immediate and coordinated actions against the junta, including by imposing economic sanctions and financial penalties, global arms embargo, and referring them to the International Criminal Court. I hope that the ICJ will acknowledge our persecutions and us as agents of our own future. And I also hope that I and my fellow Rohingya brothers and sisters will no longer have to repeat the same thing over and over again and be traumatized by our pain and our suffering and seen as nothing more than just victims of genocide. Thank you very much. I'll stop here and I look forward to the Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much, Wei Wei. And thank you to I see that there's a robust chat that's happening. And please do know that we will be addressing, in addition to issues related to Rohingya and specifically other ethnic groups, we'll also be talking about the military's current crackdown in the country as well during the course of this event. So I'm going to turn next to Tun Kin. Tun Kin, your organization, Brooke, is leading a universal jurisdiction case in Argentina in partnership with Rohingya and Bangladesh to individually hold those associated with genocide accountable. In December, we saw that there were some updates to the status of the case, including you going there to testify to the court. Can you tell us a little bit more about the current status of the case and what kind of concrete outcomes we can expect from it?
Thank you, Akila, organizing this important event, very timely, and a great honor to be here with all of my friends. And thank you for your question. As you know, in December, I traveled to Argentina and took the stand at the federal court in Buenos Aires. In the opening of the case there, under the legal principle of universal jurisdiction, this was a landmark day in our quest for justice, what has happened to Rohingya people. During that hearing, I spoke about my own personal history and decades-long oppression, which I have witnessed, which I have faced, and when Rohingya faced in Myanmar, also drew the attention of military atrocities committed against Rohingya in 2016 and 17, including, for example, of Shupchin, Gudaping, Tula Tuli, Mongnu village, where I spent like 4 to 5 weeks in Bangladesh, 2017. And what they face, the atrocity crimes they faced by Burmese military, which were unbelievable. And I spoke about that. And also 6 women who were victims or witnessed sexual violence during that massacre are witnesses in that case. We accept that this will be a long process, but it is a start of the case. It is a start of the case that ultimately hope, will end with the architects of the Rohingya genocide being behind bars. We are continuing to identify the perpetrators of these crimes, including the senior leadership of the military. Moving forward, we hope more cases will be opened under universal jurisdiction case so that overwhelming evidence against the military atrocity will be heard. And one day, those responsible for these despicable actions will end up where they belong, behind the bars. Let us not forget the military's coup in Burma was built upon the military's deep-rooted culture of impunity. For too long, it has been able to behave however it wishes against the people with no repercussions. But this is slowly starting to change. As I say, it won't necessarily be a quick process, but we hope that wheels are in motion so that justice will be delivered one day and the military's culture of impunity will be brought to an end. And also, I want to point out here, when we working in this case and we raising up, and not only for the Rohingya, this is a case for my brothers and sisters in Shin State, Karenni State, Kachin State, other parts of Burma, Sagaing Division, where we've seen crimes committed by the military every day, Of course, we Rohingya face in 2016 and 17, until today, ongoing genocide is there. The other side of Burma today, we can see, every day we can see in social media, dead bodies and, tortured and killed and by Burmese military. So when we talk about justice, this is not only for the Rohingya, for all the people of Burma. And I believe that we can move forward with this case. And this is the boys, this case is the boys, this case is the boys for the Rohingya people, and also this for all the people of Burma. And we Rohingyas are fighting frontline for the justice, and we will continue our fight. Thank you. I stop here.
Thank you so much, Tim Ken. I think, you and both you and Wei are really helping to show how, justice moving forward for the country is justice for everybody, despite what a specific issue that the case is focused on. And on that, maybe I'm going to turn to Wei Po, who, can maybe address a little bit of the larger context of this issue. So as we've been talking about here, as we've seen, concrete cases that are focused on the acts against the Rohingya move forward, larger calls for justice in Myanmar, which ethnic women have long been at the center of, remain unanswered. The Women's League of Burma has long highlighted the need for accountability, in particular for sexual violence against ethnic women. In 2014, I remember WLB released a report called Same Impunity, Same Patterns, which noted that sexual abuses by the Burma military will not stop until there's a genuine civilian government. And I think we're really seeing that play out today in the context of the coup. WLB continues to document sexual violence in the context of the coup, as well as continued armed conflict in ethnic states. Can you please tell us a little bit about the abuses the WLB is currently seeing and what you would like to see to happen to end the military's impunity?
Thank you for inviting me. And so can I share my slides? So I just use...
Yep, you should be able to share your screen, no problem.
But it doesn't show what happened. Anyway, I cannot.
I can pull it up for you. Just give me a second. But okay. Why don't you go ahead and get started, and I'll pull your slides up.
Yep. So my name is Loy Bonge from Women League of Burma. So I belong from the Ang nationality from Northern of Shan State. Actually, I also one of the activist and human rights defender who have been witnessed the military is killing our people and burning our houses and burning our peri since I was young. So I also one of the IDP who have been fleeing around since I was young too. So in Burma, as we know, the military has been committed a lot of the cases in the country, and not only now, but also in the past too. So as a Women League of Burma, we are have been working for over 20 years to document all of the cases that have been committed by the military junta as a crime against humanity and war crimes. So currently you will see the number of the military junta that have been committed. Please, next slide. It is the update, the number of the military junta have been committed the crimes and crime against humanity and war crimes. There are over 100 women were killed, and there are 1,000 women were imprisoned, and you will see that there are over 600 women were released, including me, like a lot of young activists who have been participating in the protests in Spring Revolution. So now currently most of the young people were targeted in the country as a human rights defender, and then they were accused as a human shield, even in the front line too. And we, as a woman of Burma, we have been documents of the cases that have been committed by the military junta. So you will see that in the please next slide. You will see that in the this Spring Revolution, the military have been committed a lot of crimes, and then thousands of people in the country have been killed. But the women still continue to face like being arrested and being killed, and then being summoned under of the arrested, even though the coup has been 1 year already, but this kind of cases still happening around in the country. And during the coup, so there are over 10 cases that have been committed by the military junta as a rape case. So this rape case was used as a weapon of war. This is very, it is very widespread and systematic committed by the military junta. We have been, as a Women League of Burma, we have been raising that war crime and crime against humanity that the military junta have been using a rape as a weapon of war since we found our organizations as a Women League of Burma. So as Alika said, so in 2000, before the 2008, so one of our member organization released like license to rape. That is also the sexual violence committed by the military junta. And currently also we release the barriers on women. It is about the sexual violence against women during the military coup, this Spring Revolution. So this kind of evidence we have been documented at all in the country, but this number are just the number that we have documented that we can reach. It is just a small number that we can reach. There might be over cases that we cannot reach out, like in the prisons and in the front line that we could not reach out. There are many cases that have been committed by the military junta. And can you go to another slide? I won't mention this kind of activity that we have been working. So this is also one of the report that I mentioned in 2018. So we have been releasing the report, same impunity and same patterns. So this is also one of the evidence that show the military junta have been uses rape as a weapon of war. And could you go to the next slide? And this is the number of the military junta that have been reported to us about the cases. So it is about 11 cases that we have received, but this is just a tip of the iceberg. So it is just small number that we have received. Please, next slide. And so this is also recent cases that the military junta have been raped. A 62-year-old woman in Cô Khai Township from northern of Shan State, where I'm based, and another cases you will see that is systematic rape case that have been committed by the military junta in Chin State. So even that is one man child mother, they has been raped in front of her husbands. So this kind of cases is not only taking place right now, it has been taking place over a decade, and women in the country have been suffer from the ethnic area. They have been suffer for many decades and for a long time. So as a Women League of Burma, we have been calling to end the impunity in the country committed by the military junta till today. And so we collaborate together with the IIMM, providing the cases through our member organization to IIMM, because in our country, the judiciary system is failed and it doesn't work. So we could not get justice for the women and for the human rights defender who have been participating in the whole revolution, not only this Spring Revolution, but even in the past too. So that's why we, as a Women League of Burma, we have been collaborating with the IIMM. And then we, as a Women League of Burma, we are one of the first organization who is calling for COI and ICC to be in our country in the past too. And currently we support for the ICJ that is highlighting about the Rohingya cases, but that is not only Rohingya cases that have been genocide, but also other ethnic women and ethnic people has also suffered from the war crime and crime against humanity and genocide too. So can you go to another slide? I will not mention at all what the WLB have been doing, but the WLB is working for policy change, and another thing is for the to seek the justice for the survivor and the victim who are suffering in our country. So we have been supporting for the policy change. We have been approaching with the national level and regional level to change the policy regarding on the women issue and regarding on the sexual violence against women. So we approach with the ethnic armed organization to change India organization system, to change the policy by themselves and to take responsibility and accountability committed by their fellow or by their soldier. So this kind of thing also we advocate for the policy change. But on the other hand, as a Women League of Burma, we are also working for documentations to get the evidence of the sexual violence against women, and the military junta commit the crime as a weapon of war, using rape as a weapon of war in our country. That kind of thing also we are doing. I will not mention at all, but let me raise our voices that we would like to international organization to hear our voices. So we are also we like to support the our sister that is calling for the international community to consider to support the NUG to sign the Rome Statute and to refer the Myanmar conditions to the ICC too, and then to support for the ICJ for the justice too. And on the other hand, we would like to ask the international community to really consider the non-cooperation with the military junta, including the targeted sanction and including economic sanction too. So thank you very much, and I hope to answer more detail in the question and answer too.
Thank you so much, Leipo, and really for making the connection of how long these abuses have been going on, not just against ethnic minorities in the countries, but specific targeting of women by a very misogynist and racist military. So I'm going to turn next to Sai Sam, who actually just shortly, a few months after the coup, briefed the UN Security Council on Myanmar, and where you laid out with clarity the atrocities committed by the military against the pro-democracy movement. We're now just a year over the coup, and we've seen escalating violence in the country and unrelenting attacks on those who oppose the military on a daily basis. But at the moment, beyond collecting evidence of these acts by the IAMM, we've yet to see the international community take any concrete steps to bring the military to justice for their current crimes. Building on Weipo's comments, as well as Weiwei's and Tunkin's, can you describe the patterns of violence and oppression being committed by the military in the past year, and what you would ideally like to see to bring about justice for these crimes? Thanks, Sam.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much for inviting me. It's an honor to be speaking alongside my fellow Myanmar brothers and sisters here. And actually, Leipo and I came from the same region in Myanmar. I'm also from Northern Shan State. I'm from Kut Khai. Well, if you ask me about the pattern of atrocities, how do I recognize the military's violation, human rights violation, and mass atrocities against the Rohingya people? Because I grew up with the stories, just like what Leipo laid out. These are the nighttime stories. My mom served as a teacher in a small village in Northern Shan State. And then that's how we learn from her about the atrocities. I mean, she, as a woman, have to worry about, working in a village, and then, the possibility of sexual violence when the military columns are coming in, for security reason in those villages. And how do we recognize these things, without justice being delivered, without legal justice being delivered? I think for the ethnic people like us, we make stories, from the stories, we can recognize the patterns. And this is how we try to keep the memory alive, how we try to remember that the suffering of other people, and then not to forget these things, and also to keep seeking for justice. So this is how we keep the stories alive and how we recognize these patterns. And from 2011, I worked in the humanitarian works to support the people being displaced by the conflict in the northern Shan and Kachin state. And it's horrible to see the situation of the internally displaced people in the camps. And in 2016, I went to visit Kutupalong camp in Bangladesh, in Cox's Bazar. And then it's so horrible to see what is going on there. And now in 2022, two of my uncles are IDP themselves, internally displaced people themselves. So you know how things are escalating and how it comes to your own doorstep. This is what we are seeing. And I must say that the decision of the ICJ to invite the agents of the SAC, the junta, to represent the state, it's an insult to the victims. It's an insult to the Myanmar people. That is how I take it. Today, I would like to briefly discuss about 3 points. One is role of society in reproducing culture of impunity and in delivering justice. So how culture of impunity has been kept alive, but at the same time, how important it is to understand and work with the society to change, to end the culture of impunity. And the second point would be the role of the state, how the state keep the impunity alive, and how it is important to solve from that angle also. And then the third point would be the materiality of the justice. It's not just the legal justice, it has to be material part of that. So that 3 points I'd like to discuss. The first point is, yes, it's very important, like the role of ICJ or the ICC or the universal jurisdiction that we are trying to seek legal justice. But at the same time, it's also very important to look at how the society is responding to that. I must say that 2017, 2011, I was very confused. It was just 1 year after the democratic transition in Myanmar, right? After the general election, and then kind of like nominal civilian government that we have. And we have started seeing a lot of changes, positive changes. But at the same time, in the ethnic minority area, people got killed, people are being displaced and all that. I was very confused. I cannot understand what is going on. By 2017, 15, 16, 17, I become quite sure that the military is not really changing. Whatever democratic transition we are seeing is the attempt of the military to keep on the power. We were talking about policy advocacy. We were talking about changes of the law at the time, like pro-vow law, for example, to work against sexual violence and all that. And I mean, when I talk about how depressing 2017 and the mass expulsion of the Rohingya is, I saw that Myanmar as a society lost our moral compass. Now, we have seen a lot of different things, but like Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, she's like the lighthouse. When we have the darkest time in our history, and then we see where she stands in that case. And then all the polity in Myanmar, all the intelligentsia in Myanmar, how they fall apart when it's come to the test of that. And I think that's very important to look at that. When we talk about policy and law advocacy, okay, we can change the law and the policy, but how that is being implemented, how that has been pushed back by the member of the parliament, how the more progressive law are being pushed back by the society itself, talking about women's rights, talking about LGBT issue, talking about religious freedom, for example, there is that nationalistic conservative part of the society. So we have to understand that and work on that. And here I would like to highlight the role of Buddhism. And when we talk about atrocities in Myanmar, there are a lot of bases there, value, beliefs, and the psyche of the Myanmar society itself. And a lot of politics in Myanmar and the atrocity is very much based on Burma Buddhist supremacy and nationalism. I mean, we can talk about legacy of colonialism, coloniality, and that, you know, the need for decolonization. But at the same time, we cannot deny that there is domestic element of that, which is the role of Buddhism in keeping patriarchism alive, in keeping nationalism and conservatism alive. And when I talk about Buddhism, it's not the Buddhist teaching itself, but Theravada Buddhism and how it is being practiced by the society and how it has been used as a tool for the state in pacifying the public and furthering the state agenda. And structurally, in the cabinet, we have Ministry of Border Affairs. And Ministry of Border Affairs is overseeing Buddhist missionary who were sent to the border area, mostly non-Buddhist area. So they are proselytizing, converting the Christian or other non-Buddhist society into Buddhist. And then they also open the school, which is called Ministry of Border Affairs School. And then they are also having what is called model villages. So people were, former inmates were sent to these border areas, including the Rohingya area, Buriram Maungdaw, and other parts of Myanmar. And then they established this model villages, school, and then Buddhist missionary. So what I'm trying to say is the role of the state there, you know, there is a systemic, structural things going on there. And yeah, I think it's very important to look at that. And I would say that with the Spring Revolution, we are seeing awakening of the society. People are started asking the role of Buddhism. You know, now a lot of Buddhist monks are fighting against, resisting against the coup, but at the same time, you are also seeing the most prominent Buddhist monks are supporting the coup. And now the society is started asking the question about Buddhism, nationalism, and conservatism. And I would say it's very important to understand these links if we want to see delivery of justice and ending the impunity in Myanmar society. The second point is the role of the state, especially what I would like to highlight is making the laws and implementing the law in Myanmar. So for example, a 1982 citizenship law, you know, a lot of people discuss about this, you know, it should be demolished, it should be repealed, and we need a more humane law that is also compatible with the international states and principles. But at the same time, there are also other laws where people did not notice. For example, like the land law, for example, you know, you might notice that it might have nothing to do with that, but it has. It's very important. The racial element in the land, you know, private property, who can own the property and who cannot. These are very important point that we have to look at that. And not to forget that not just the military government who are making this law, but also the previous NLD, you know, who are enacting certain laws which are very much violating the right of the ethnic minorities and the indigenous people in Myanmar. So it's very important to look at that. And yeah, it's very important to work on changing these laws. I think that I would say the National Unity Government and the National Unity Consultative Council, they really have to look into these issues. And my last point is
okay, good. I'm just gonna
my last point
just
is
quickly wrap up. Thank you.
How ending impunity is linked with materiality of justice. You know, for example, like when we look at the Herero and Namakwa genocide, you know, people are, you know, yes, there is that proposal about, you know, compensation, financial compensation and that, but that is not enough. People are saying that we need our land back. You know, so that there is that angle, you know, yes, because I studied land, and, you know, land, it's not just a place for economic production. It's also about social reproduction, you know, as a people, you know, as a society, territoriality of land, you know, that kind of perspective These are very important. So when we talk about delivering justice, we have to look at return resettlement, repatriation, but at the same time, it's also very important to look at representation, but also the redistribution of the vital resources. Without that, the society, the people cannot survive and justice cannot be delivered. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for really bringing that holistic perspective on what justice looks like, not just formal legal justice. And I'll just say from a personal perspective, I'm from India, and we're seeing similar moves with the Hindutva movement in India right now in actually mobilizing an extreme form of religion against minority populations. And, having worked on these issues for a while, it's something that, I see, so much of what you're saying playing out in so many other places, including in my home. So I want to pick up on so many of these questions as we move into Q&A. So quickly, we're going to turn to Ambassador Rapp and Sarah, and then we're going to move into Q&A. So Ambassador Rapp, we're going to return a little to formal justice for the moment. We're going to talk about the ICC. So this is one of the potential areas where we may see justice moving forward, not just for the Rohingya on the current investigation into Bangladesh, but as well some potential moves in Article 12.3 submission by the National Unity Government back to 2002, as well as, continued pushes for a Security Council referral. So can you tell us a little bit more about each of these efforts and their potential to actually bring, individuals to justice in front of the court?
Well, thank you very much, Akila, and it's a great honor to be part of this panel tonight. Or Day, or wherever you are. I happen to be on the Syrian border interviewing survivors, attempting to build cases that are now being pursued in Europe for crimes that began 11 years ago next month. So the end of impunity is something that I believe in very much, and very happy to that this is really the theme of this panel, because there's no question in my mind that if there had been pressure to prosecute the violations that happened before the release of Aung San Suu Kyi since 1988 or earlier, if there'd been any effort to really have any kind of transitional justice, truth or remembrance, anything like that, we wouldn't have had the military thinking it could take power in February 1st, 2021. We reaped the whirlwind of failing to press for justice. My own experience in this area began at international tribunals, where I was a prosecutor at the Rwanda Tribunal, and then a senior trial attorney and chief of prosecutions, and then going over to the Sierra Leone Special Court, an internationalized court. And these courts we turned to in the period after the end of the Cold War, and have turned to the ICC since 2002 in these situations, often where the state is in fact controlled by those who are alleged to be committing these horrible international crimes, and that has often required, for any kind of accountability, taking it to the international level. And in this situation, the one place where we may have an opportunity is at the International Criminal Court. And in saying that, I should note that in many of the other situations, Syria, Yemen, Ethiopia, Tigray now, and others, many say, well, frankly, they do not have really any open path to the ICC. In the case of Myanmar, Burma, we do have at least one, and as you say, perhaps two others. But let me just talk about them and make sure people understand them, because for many that aren't familiar with international justice, it often seems unfair. You can have genocide against the Rohingya. You can have people shot down in the street. You can have massive crimes that are much more serious than some of the crimes that the ICC or international courts have dealt with in the past. And I say, why not us? And it's because the International Criminal Court is limited in its jurisdiction. Generally, it's taking cases only involving state parties, crimes committed on the territory of a state party or by the citizens of a state party. And when we talk about the crimes by this regime, they aren't being committed. They're being committed by the citizens of Myanmar. That's not a state party to the ICC, and they're being committed massively on the territory of that state. It's only because of this crime of forced deportation or crimes related to it, where there's an element that's committed next door in Bangladesh, that we've got the possibility of using territorial jurisdiction to get into the ICC. There's the second thing that you mentioned, and I'll talk more about that case in a moment, but the second way in is the 12.3 jurisdiction. Understand states within the ICC can refer themselves to the ICC. That's happened in the case of Uganda and Congo. And if Myanmar were in the court, it could refer itself. Of course, it's not. But there's also provision that a non-party can refer itself, and particularly for any period of time since the ICC came into being in July 1st of 2002. So the government could do it. And so we have this effort by the National Unity Government, basically to send Myanmar to the ICC for every crime that could be within the court's jurisdiction since July 1st of 2002, when the ICC came into being. And then we have the possibility of Security Council referral. That's happened twice in 2005 with Darfur, Sudan Darfur, which was referred on a 10-0 to 5 abstentions vote in the UN Security Council. And the ICC continues to have jurisdiction and is now prosecuting the case we call the Ali Kashab case arising out of that. And then we have the Libya case that went in 15-0 in a resolution in 2011. And though they haven't arrested anybody, there are a number of charges that are out there and others that will be filed. That succeeded, but since then, we've had Russia and China blocking constantly any prospect of sending Syria, and we had this sort of message that if you tried to send a case like Myanmar with its close relationship with the Chinese government, it would also be vetoed. But let me just deal with them individually in terms of the forced deportation case. And I know it's disappointing anyone looking at the massive crimes committed in Myanmar and the crimes particularly committed as we speak since February 1st of 2021 to focus only on this piece. But I do think it is extremely positive that we do have a way in, any way in, because others don't. And it, of course, relates to the crimes against the Rohingya, specifically the forced deportation. Now, of course, others have tried to use this same precedent. My friends in Syria, because of people moving into Jordan, there are other possibilities that even the Xinjiang case has come up in terms of Tajikistan, for instance, that there could be other ways to use this precedent. But the evidence, frankly, in the case of Myanmar is particularly strong, and I know the documents that have been brought out of the country by civil society organizations that are now being collected by the international mechanism, and they point to powerful evidence of intent to force people, either kill them, commit other violence against them, but force them into Bangladesh because they were foreigners. They need to go back where they came from, and all this sort of ethnic language and the refusal to call people by Rohingya, the Bengalis, etc., all is part of that intent to exclude them and force them back as not really part of the nation. So I think that's genocidal potentially, but it also is quite even stronger on the forcible deportation. And the fact that the judges have accepted the investigation and it can proceed, and we have such direct evidence of Tatmadaw responsibility. There is frankly nothing that prevents the prosecutor from tomorrow seeking an arrest warrant against Min Aung Hlaing and others, and I hope he does. Absolutely critical to make this leader the same kind of pariah that Milosevic was. And even though it took a long time with Bashir, he was eventually overthrown in his own country. And we hope eventually will go to The Hague, but he's certainly not going back to power, even with the coup d'etat in Khartoum. So I really do think that it's important that we have that step. Now, I'd much prefer that if we could move ahead on the 12.3 basis. I would say the precedents are not particularly welcoming. The ICC has done this a couple times, but there really wasn't any question about who the government was. And it happened in the case of Cote d'Ivoire. Frankly, both President Gbagbo and later President Ouattara both sought to refer the case to the ICC, Cote d'Ivoire not being a state party. But it only came forward after it was clear that Ouattara was in power. And the one thing about 12.3, as opposed to when states refer a case, it still is automatically before the court. The prosecutor doesn't need judicial permission. But when a non-party refers a case, a non-party state, then the courts still have to approve it. And so that's additional step on the 12-3. I would note that this was attempted by the Mohamed Morsi and his movement in Egypt. He was clearly legitimately elected as president of Egypt. There were horrible violence against people that could have qualified as crimes against humanity in his overthrow. Of course, he was imprisoned and eventually died in prison. And the ICC would not recognize that particular referral by the clearly legitimately elected president of Egypt that was overthrown by the current president, El-Sisi. And so you have that sort of precedent and a desire not to get involved in these sort of jurisdictional issues, but it's well worth pushing that cause, because the NUG is broad-based. It's frankly more broad-based than the government was that was overthrown on February 1st, 2021. And we appreciate its movements to recognize the Rohingya as part of Myanmar, part of the nations of Myanmar. And I think that's extremely important and positive. But the court really doesn't want to get into the position of saying, we'll accept this group and not this group and this group. This gets us into this jurisdictional issue, which was also dealt with in the ICJ in the last few days in New York and elsewhere. It's certainly possible that the prosecutor could take a different view, but it would in the end be up to the judges to decide whether to open an investigation if the prosecutor did take that view. Then on the Security Council, since the coup, trying to get anything out of the Security Council has been just so difficult. To get a president, if you can't get a resolution, you get a presidential statement, but that requires the unanimous all 15 agreeing. And I think they've had press statements, and then they're always so watered down. That's sort of the next step down. The advantage of a resolution is they have to actually vote on it. And you don't need 15, you need 9, of course, with no veto. And I know in the case of Syria, a case that I was involved in and made sure the United States supported it, and we got 13 countries that went with it. The French, after they saw the Caesar photos in 2014, decided that they would take it in front of the Security Council and have a vote on sending Syria to the ICC. And that generally sort of violated the etiquette in the Security Council, which is you don't bring up things knowing they're going to be vetoed. But in that case, it was so important that it was done, and there was a 13-2 vote. Well, rather than anticipating that China is going to veto this thing, I think it's necessary that we organize and get the matter presented and to bring as much pressure as we can. And then, you may have China saying internal affairs, peace process, repatriation, all the usual sort of thing, and vetoing. But we want to make it as difficult as possible. So, and that would be much better to be able to deal specifically with the period of time that the Security Council could declare and cover all of the crimes, including those since the coup a year and 21 days ago. So that's important. The final thing I want to say is that the UN has not been silent in this space. We've had the Human Rights Council establishing the international mechanism and it being fully funded by the General Assembly and a very strong vote. I think it was like 145-12 in the General Assembly. So it is an issue upon which there is, I think, and that was, of course, initially because of the Rohingya, the crimes against the Rohingya, but of course now it has been expanded, and if you've read the reports from my friend Nick Kumjian, they're gathering massive information on the crimes being committed since the military coup. But it's, of course, also very important that mechanism cooperate with the ICC. I mean, there's evidence at Facebook, for instance, that could be useful in the ICC case on the Rohingya in terms of incitement and use of this ethnic language and that kind of thing. And that, frankly, a little difficult for the ICC to go directly to Washington because of our laws, but frankly, the US government supports this investigation and supports the prosecution. So the IIM can potentially obtain its information and then share it with the ICC and overcome that particular legal obstacle. So, obviously we wanted to do more than that, but it is, I think, something that is positive. I do want to salute Tung Kin and the use of universal jurisdiction. I often speak on panels in which the theme is the future of international justice is domestic, and certainly we've seen that in many situations it is working, and I really do hope that we can build other ways. Argentina's wonderful that we've got that happening because of Tung Kin and Professor Quintana. I'm really pleased about that, but I think we need to find other ways to also hold this regime and its economic enablers to account in every court of the world that we can find.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for that comprehensive view. And I think certainly as someone who works on Security Council advocacy, we can all see that it's maybe a dead end avenue, but I think it's worth at least trying some of the measures that you're talking about. So I'm finally going to turn over to Sarah really briefly before we go to questions. And to those in the audience, please do ask your questions in the Q&A. So we'll have them ready to go when we move into those. So Sarah, the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum works around the world on the prevention and punishment of mass atrocities, including in Myanmar. And, you know, you've heard from all of the other panelists kind of about the imperative of justice. And we've talked about a range of different measures. But, you know, in your view, what are the key, you know, priorities and steps that you think need to be taken by the international community to break the cycle of impunity in Myanmar?
Thank you, Akila, and thank you to the Global Justice Centre for hosting this really important discussion today. It's such a privilege to share the floor with such an illustrious panel of speakers, and so thank you for including me in the discussion. Your question, Akila, about what the international community and individual governments can do to advance justice and accountability is so incredibly important. And in my framing of my response to that question, I want to take as a starting point the institutional mandate of the Simon Scott Center for the Prevention of Genocide, which was established as part of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum's mission to do for today's victims that which was not done for the Jews of Europe. And in many ways, our work tries to push towards that very goal that Wei Wei mentioned in her remarks of pursuing never again. And in that spirit, we've been working on the situation in Burma for many years, as Akila mentioned, on a range of fronts, from bearing witness to unfolding atrocities, raising the alarm about the potential for future atrocities, and working behind the scenes to advance justice and accountability. And from that vantage point, I want to share just a few short reflections and leave time for Q&A about what the international community can do to advance justice. And I think it's very fortunate that I wrap up this discussion because my co-panelists have outlined what needs to be done in such clear terms that I really can sort of package it up and put it together. And the first point that I want to make, and it's one that again harks back to our institutional mandate of doing for today's victims, is the need for governments and the international community to invest in supporting and empowering victims and survivors who want to participate in the justice process to do so. And we have seen the tremendous power of victims in advancing justice for mass atrocities throughout history, including in the Holocaust and victim-led efforts after the Holocaust, both by Jewish victims, Roma and Sinti victims, and other communities that were targeted. The ICJ case itself provides somewhat limited scope for victim participation, but as we've talked about, there is tremendous work being done in a range of other fora too, and it's heartening to see members of affected communities involved. But I really want to stress that the international community must not forget those who are in Burma and at the border who are under threat for the work that they are doing to advance justice. And I'd really plead to the international community to invest in those spaces. The second point, and I think Sam raised this extremely eloquently, is the importance of supporting holistic forms of justice and not just focusing on state responsibility and criminal accountability, but also thinking about reparations. Potentially, of course, the ICJ case could provide some avenues for this, but really thinking about reparations, memorialization, searching for missing persons, guarantees of non-recurrence, making sure that our blinders are not on and that we're not simply focusing on the kind of criminal accountability dimensions, as I said. The third point relates to the intersection between accountability, ending impunity, and atrocity prevention. And as Weiwei said, the ICJ case will take many years. And as we've heard today, the situation is unfolding as we speak. And the ICJ's provisional measures order is incredibly important, and governments should press for compliance with these obligations. But I think making sure that governments recognize the events that have occurred in Myanmar for what they are, and ensuring that atrocity prevention is a part of their policy towards the situation is also incredibly important. The final point that I want to make, and just to sort of wrap things up before we hand over to the Q&A, is that all the tools are there at the disposal of the international community. And they include economic sanctions, which, we welcome the fact that the US government has recently sanctioned top generals, but we would welcome further sanctions, arms embargoes. The US government, of course, has the Global Magnitsky Act, and there are other similar measures that other countries have adopted and are adopting. There in the US, of course, again, is the JADE Act, and many kind of legal tools that exist to impose sanctions on those responsible. There's pledging support to the Gambia in the ICJ case. Canada, the Netherlands, and the Maldives have already done this, but other governments can do the same. And another point, again, tools that the international community has at its disposal and knows about, conducting their own analysis of what has occurred and making determinations. The museum has determined that a genocide occurred against the Rohingya in 2017. And we would welcome other governments, I should say, to look into what has occurred and make their own determinations and use those determinations to inform their policy. So I'm going to stop there and hand it back to Akila to lead the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I think that was also a really great way of pulling together kind of the various recommendations that we've heard from the panelists. So, to start the discussion here, I would love to flip a little bit. We've talked a lot about international justice and accountability. And in the context of Myanmar, that's largely because for so long, structurally, domestic accountability was not possible. Whether it was constitutional guarantees of impunity, whether that was a judicial system that could not be trusted. WAPO, talked about some of the cases where you had a judicial system where you couldn't take sexual violence cases. Or a lack of enabling law. So I'd love to think a little bit, in this context, we talk about justice and accountability and what it means to build a culture of accountability to the country. The previous government, we've heard Aung San Suu Kyi and others say that accountability is not constructive or helpful. And so, as processes now with the NUG thinking about what they can do to constructively engage with justice, what the NUCC can do in building a new federal charter for the country, what, would your recommendations be? And maybe I'll, throw it to, I know some people here have been involved in some of the NUCC conversations and others. What do you see are the key priorities that you'd like to see instilled in kind of this future making of the country? And I will just pose the question and leave it open to anyone who maybe wants to start. And if no one starts, I will call on somebody. So someone start. Weiwei?
Sure. I think this is a really great questions that we have to take really, really seriously as a country, as a society, and among the revolutions, among the spring revolutions and leaderships and the spring revolutions. I pretty much agree with Sarah's comments and also Siasain's comments on looking into the justice in a more holistic manner. And we are actually pleased to see NUG effort on NUG's efforts and expressing a stronger commitment to the international justice, as well as following international human rights standards, including the Rome Statute than previous government. And I think, however, I think it is important that we actually, the NUG and other leaders in the movement, and UCC, all of this, new institutions that arise after the coup, along with the Spring Revolutions, need to look at the justice as a more holistic manner, and it has to instill within the hearts and mindset and culture of the society itself, because the questions of justice and the issue of justice hasn't been discussed much in Myanmar. And I think there is a way, in most cases in the past, the justice systems and the concept of justice itself has been used to basically to target, to persecute, or to repress the individuals. So people are, when we talk about justice, or when we talk about rule of law, or when we even talk about justice systems, people have like fear and trauma to really engage or understand, or even and attempt to access any of the justice systems available for them. So now, I think we really need to see, instill the understanding of justice through the mindset of people, to really understand that, justice sector and justice systems and justice, the issue of justice, the questions of justice is something that we served for the community to repair, rebuild, repair our harmed, and rebuild our society. So basically, we need to have new thinking, rethinking the justice, and reform the justice systems, as well as have a stronger strategies on the non-recurrence and atrocity preventions. And we also want to see that the NUG government think beyond the criminal justice. And often that is not just NUG as a society. When you talk about the justice, it's mostly we're making reference to the criminal justice. But the harm that has been done against the ethnic communities, including Rohingya, is beyond criminal justice. So we really need to be able to look into this each crisis in a different nature of the crises more deeply, and come up with a stronger and holistic plans to repair all the harms done against the Rohingya and other communities. So that includes, as I mentioned, rethinking the justice in Myanmar, rebuilding the legal systems, and having a stronger transitional justice plan, as well as having a plan on the non-recurrence or preventions of atrocity crimes, include the integrations of human rights value, international human rights standards to the mindset and to the policies and paper. And lastly, the most important thing is to educate people that we as a society, that democracy is our goal. Yes, federal democracy or inclusive democracy we talk about, but this can only be done also when we reform the justice, and when we build a society based on the justice, where people feel they can get protection, and their harms was repaired, and they can have access to justice. I think that's very important, because, as I said, this topic has been sidelined for all the years and throughout the Burma history, because people have been struggling for the to fight against the military dictatorship. We didn't have even time to think about the justice issue as a priority as we fight for political power and legitimacy against the military dictatorships. Thank you.
Thank you. We also added about the justice. We need to look back to in the past also. Sure. So Wewe Nu and me, we are also the two of the women delegation who are participating in the NUCC currently as a woman delegations. However, when we are talking about the social justice in the country, it is very important to look the substantive equality in reality right now. And as young people like us who are involved in the Spring Revolution right now, we believe that this revolution is not only to revolve for the to end the military coup, it is also to terminate all of the discriminations and patriarchy in the society and the injustice for all people, whatever you are citizens or non-citizens, or you are indigenous people or not. That is none of the issue that we are considering, but we need to consider the social justice for our country. So currently, as a NUCC is a body of the collective leadership and the all-inclusive body without of the military in our history in our country. There are no any political platform that have been provided by the in the past. So currently we are considering to found a collective leadership to guide to provide the political guidance to the NUG and to the CRPH. So we would like to found our country, a new country. So we don't want to get one union system. We believe that only federal can solve the problem that we have been faced for many decades in our country. So including the atrocity faced by Rohingya people, by ethnic people, you cannot solve without the political dialogue and without the political platform that we have been would like to ask. So that point, transitional justice is very important for us, and we trying to set up one of the provision for the transitional justice and equality, including the gender equality principle in the future of the constitution of the country, including the transitional constitutions also. So this is very important for the international community to recognize and to support the NUCC, and on the other hand to support for the NUG to be a legitimate government in currently. And another thing is very important for the international community to really consider for the evaluations and monitoring plan of the Myanmar conditions, because geography, according to the political geography, so China is also one of the big enemy who are really, can I say, the big enemy for our country that is really pushing the pressure amount of and supporting the SAC according the arms also and other resources too. So it's make the SAC to be alive and in reality. So that point, without of the international community support, we as a the people in the country, we cannot struggle those kind of things too. So that's why we really need for the international mechanism to seek the justice in Burma. So we cannot seek the justice in our own internal judiciary system. If we get one day, if we have the federal system in our country, sure, that at that time we need to implement for the transitional justice, including the rehabilitation for the women who have been suffer in the conflict area. So this is also very important. And the last thing that I would like to request the international community to really consider to work with the local community-based organization like us. Because currently the SAC is also cannot control all of the or around the country, but on the other hand, NUG also doesn't have a revolution liberated area and territory yet. So only the CSO organization that can work effectively in the IDP camp and in the community in reality. So that means to deliver your humanitarian aid effectively, please work with the CSO organization who are really working effectively in the community, including the IDP camps. So as a Women League of Burma, the WLB, our own organization, we are spreading around the country and we are helping the IDP like in Kaya State. So KNWO and Kaya Women Organization and Kaya Women Organization are in the conflict area. So we can deliver those kind of humanitarian aid through them. I think the international community also should consider that kind of thing too, and to bring the justice through the international mechanism too. So we would like to invite the international mechanisms to work in our country. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Tim.
I just want to add, national unity government have taken some positive step, public statement. And we have seen that regarding on International Court of Justice, the case, the preliminary objection they have withdrawn, abolishing national verification card, which is a genocide card, we call it. And they abolished that. Also, one thing we need to look at a kind of broader way. We Rohingya people are manageable minority. We have our land, we have our culture, we have our own civilization, and we, in Arakan state, we are second largest minority group. So I agree that Brother Saisam spoke about the land issue, and so our land many lands been taken away by the Burmese, the military. I mean, when we talk about genocide, there are a lot of things, you have to go back what a starting point, 1962, they strip off our ethnic rights taken away, starting from 1962, and citizenship rights and imposing those restrictions. And after 1988, military coup power again, our land's been taken away. Many of our lands been taken away by the military. So we have to recognize what happened to the Rohingya, what they have passed through. We have to recognize what is going on right now. It is intentionally destroying a community. It is a genocide. And we would like to hear that from National Unity Government, what's happened to the Rohingya, because this is a serious issue. 1 million people population fled from the country, the world largest refugee camp in Bangladesh right now. And we never know what the future will be. These children, 40% are children there. And in Burma, when we face that, most of the people, they did not believe what's happened to the Rohingya. And, there are, when our sisters were raped by the Burmese military, we have seen that these are fake rape and it's not happened. And when houses were burned down, these Rohingya burned their own homes. I mean, we have to believe on the reality. We have to believe what's happened to the Rohingya. This in society that need to be more broader way. Educating is very important. Same time, we, of course, national unity government, we would like to see more supportive, more broader way international community acceptance. When we, a national unity government, want to work international community, of course, there are some steps they are taken positively. We welcome it. We are very pleased to see that. So we want to see more steps NUG bravely should take, accepting, UN fact-finding missions report. This is UN mandated fact-finding report. I've mentioned what happened to the Rohingya is genocide. We want to see that thing more clear, and we have not seen from national unity government a term genocide against Rohingya is happening, unfortunately. Of course, we are together with the people of Burma. Our brothers and sisters in Burma, they are facing, like how Rohingya faced 2017. We are together fighting to get rid of this military. We will continue our fight with our brothers and sisters from Burma for justice and sanctioning military, fund and military, supporting military, cutting off aid, and we are together with everything. And Rohingya activists, Rohingya people are together to fight to get rid of this military murderous regime. But same time, we want to see more positive steps from national unity government. Whatever we see, these are very good, but for more positive step, then we can see that inclusive future federal union and Rohingya as a group of people, as an ethnic group, our rights being taken away, that need to be also, we want to see from national unity government. Thank you, I stop here.
Stephen?
Yeah, I have to leave right at the bottom of the hour because I have a flight to Istanbul and my colleagues are knocking hard on the door. But I do want, this isn't really my part of the discussion, but having dealt with so many countries recently, having been in the Gambia, which of course is the country that began the case in the ICJ, and seeing the great work of its Truth and Reconciliation and Reparations Commission and the report that it gave and the hearings that it held, of course, over a relatively brief period of repression compared to that we've had in Myanmar. But I do think that it's extremely important for the NUG to recognize the importance of a truth-seeking process that's broadly based, that really does pull everyone together to tell their story. No amnesties, it'll have to be decided exactly how this is structured, but at least the victims and survivors should be able to tell their story. And then the process can go forward and decide how to deal with it. I'm, obviously a fan of prosecuting the big shots and reconciling with others. But, there are different approaches and different cultures. And indeed, maybe just the expression of remorse may be sufficient in some situations. But there's been a blind eye always turned to the past. And if there's going to be a new country and hope and the kind of federal Burma that we hope we'll have in the future, then I think that's really essential. And that ought to be, non-controversial, to say that this is what we need. I mean, who can be against the truth, really? And but once you hear the truth, it's not quite that it sets you free, but that it opens up the possibilities of what you need to do next. And other countries have been through this process. It's never easy, but there are ways forward. And I hope that's something that can be incorporated in the NUG program as we look at all the other challenges to what we hope. I think I'm extremely optimistic. I guess I'm optimistic by nature, but it really does seem that this military is being rejected by the whole nation. And I'm hopeful that we will have a positive transition, but it's the courage of those young people on the street and of the whole nation that is making this possible. And we're with you and do anything that we can to assist.
Thank you, Stephen. And you need to leave to get your flight. I feel like I should be reminding you of that too. And we're at the bottom of the hour, but I think I'm just going to take moderator's privilege to extend us a little bit. I see both Sai Sam and Wei Wei who want to come in. So maybe Sai Sam, and we'll bid adieu to Stephen, and then Wei Wei. Sai Sam, do you want to go first? Yeah.
Okay. Thanks so much. I mean, to be very honest with you, for someone who's trying to do advocacy work since 2011, when the conflict broke out again in Myanmar, and observing what is going on and in many different international arenas, I must say that I mean, you will not blame me if I say I have very little trust in the international systems. I know why it is important to pursue accountability in this arena, but I to be very honest, I would rather invest my energy in other, mainly the groundworks and changing the Myanmar society, the way of thinking. When we talk about racism in Myanmar, discrimination, how a state it can perpetrate such unspeakable violence and atrocity against the Rohingya people and other ethnic minority. I mean, there is a lot of things we can talk about. One would be the legacy of the colonialism, right? The coloniality in the way people are being categorized, ethnic and races are being categorized, counted, and being governed, right? Through the colonial lens, and we have to say that there is an internal colonization going on, keeping going on in Myanmar, after the British left, but then we are seeing the Burma majority colonization. It's keep going on, and Myanmar is an evolving state, and now we are seeing NUG, NUCC, and now we are seeing, like Ko Tonkin laid out, we are seeing a lot of very positive steps. But still, there are very fundamental questions that we need to ask, especially when it's come to the federal charter. Like the NUCC has proposed this. I took it very positively. I think it's a very important step. But the very critical question we have to ask here is, what the federal charter going to deliver for the Rohingya people? Are they ever counted in there? Whenever we talk about peace in many separate forums in Myanmar, in federal discussion, it's about Danyenda, which is the original people. That concept itself is the legacy of colonialism. We have to challenge that very concept. And what about the non-natives? The supremacy of the native, right? Nativism, right? But we have to ask, for example, like the Chinese descendant, the Indian descendant, or those who are being seen as separate, Gokang Wa, they are the very, good example to look at. And I must say that there is a positive step that I see from the discussion of the Shan group. They are proposing like, well, in Shan state, there is an ethnic tension. You know very well, right? Like between the Shan and the Ta'ang, there is a huge tension between the Gokang, who are being seen as Chinese. Of course, they are ethnic Chinese, but they've been in Myanmar for 400, 500 years, but they are never counted as being one of us, right? So these are the questions we really have to ask. Federalism, we have seen in Ethiopia, right? Federalism in Myanmar is based on nationality or race or ethnicity. It's not a silver bullet. We are talking about federal democracy, federal charter, which will become the foundation of a new constitution. But at this very important juncture, we have to question about the very concept of native supremacy about the Danyenda. So I would like to pose this question to NUCC and NUG. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Wei Wei?
Yeah, so I just want to share some of my discussions with our Rohingya brothers and sisters in Rakhine as well as in Bangladesh. Over the last several months, I've been talking to many young people and some other stakeholders and women regarding the NUG response to Rohingya issue, as well as their approach to the international justice, for example, expressing willingness to coordinate with the ICJ, International Court of Justice, and attempt to get representation there. Like Go Tonkin mentions, a lot of the discussions come with the frustration that NUG has not actually recognized the Rohingya suffering as genocide, although there are mountains amounts of evidences that indicate the Rohingya were particularly targeted because of our ethnicity and religion. For decades, it's not just that the clearance operations happened in 2017 and 2016, but the persecutions has been there on the basics of race and ethnicity is for decades. So the people are frustrated for the fact that NUG has not recognized the crimes, and NUG hasn't been actually meaningfully engaging with the Rohingya community as they talk about justice, or as they talk about future of the country, federal union. Also, like Sia Sain said, not only for the justice, bringing justice for the affected communities, victim communities, but also as we are a rebuilding new country, we are dedicated to rebuild new country. I think Rohingya should be also meaningfully engaged in for the future of the country as a main stakeholder. So I think Rohingya should be meaningfully engaged, not only as a victim community to bring justice for them, but also as one of the main stakeholders in rebuilding the country and securing their federal future in the federal union. Yes, I have also questions since I have privilege to join a couple of meetings since we become members of the NUCC as a women group. My organization, Women's Peace Network, I was able to join some of the latest meetings, and I have also raised questions about, whether raise questions about the securing the minorities' futures and political representations in the federal union, and specifically in states where there are diverse ethnic communities are living, and especially for the minority groups within the states, securing our future, our rights, and our including human rights and political rights is important, and none of this issue has been discussed. So I hope that the NUCC and NUG will be really pay more attention to more deeper, complex nature of our communities on the ground. So that's the second point. And also, like I said earlier, I think it is critical that we don't just blame the military about the crimes or about the injustice that ethnic communities, different communities has faced in Myanmar. It's beyond military. It's obvious that non-military sectors and institutions are involved, and it is important that NUG indicate not just blaming to the military, but also indicate that the bringing justice for in a more broader sense and broader context, and accountability for the everyone involved, not just only military. Noting that military is the main perpetrators in this, alongside with all of these crimes. Yes, I'll stop here.
Thank you, Wei. I'm going to turn it, we're very over time, but I'm going to turn it over to Sarah just to give her an opportunity to add a few thoughts, and then we're going to close up here.
Yeah, I just want to, again, thank you for hosting this conversation, and what I hope has been an opportunity to recenter some of the discussions that have been going on the past couple of weeks at a very high level about the importance of the case at the ICJ, but to really recenter us about the horrific crimes that have been committed and that people are continuing to experience. And I really hope that this discussion can really remind us to keep our focus on the people that have been affected and not to get sidetracked. So thank you again, Akila, and to all of my panelists, my co-panelists. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. And really, thank you. It's clear. I think we could, this is a conversation that I think needs to continue. We could continue here today, but it's late and yeah, sorry, go ahead, Wei.
I think there's a very important questions at the chat box. If any of you want to
about the ICJ.
Yeah, I think there's.
I know. I'm my only concern is that we're already 10 minutes over time, but I do think there are many questions we didn't get to, and I think we probably will need to have a follow-up conversation about some of these issues. And certainly I think the question on provisional measures can hopefully be brought into the conversation we're hosting on Thursday, really focused on the path forward for the Rohingya and really thinking about what the role the provisional measures can play in helping to, really pave that path forward and draw the international community supported. And I really want to thank everyone here today for also pushing us to expand this conversation on what justice and accountability means, that it's not just sometimes these formalistic processes at international tribunals that we focus on, and that there's equally, I think, in this time and this point in time, a need to be supporting the communities that are organizing around building the future of the country, really to be building support for a new, the new federal charter, and to lay this groundwork and culture of accountability that you're all talking about as one of the key baselines is the future of the country. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. I want to thank you all for sharing your expertise with us and really look forward to continuing this conversation. And please do join us on Thursday for the conversation that's focused a little bit more on the path forward for the Rohingya. So thanks everyone, and have a wonderful morning, evening, night, depending on where you are.
Thank you too.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.